Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll learn to become a better, more business-savvy designer so you can dominate your competition. Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Grotzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I'm getting into 17 potential red flags for bad clients. Can you believe I came up with so many? I've encountered all of these at some point in my career, so stick around because I will also share some of my good and bad experiences about some of them and why some are deal breakers, but some not necessarily. Now, a lot of graphic designers try to take on every client who comes their way. Every prospect that comes to you is not going to be your ideal client. And you shouldn't try to take on clients who aren't a good fit. Now, I know in my earlier days of freelancing, I would be so blinded by the excitement and the opportunity for a new project or client that my judgment would go out the window. And that's why I have so many bad client stories to share with you. So at least something good came out of it, right? It's important to be on the lookout for certain behaviors, personality traits, requests, or demands from them. And that's going to help you decide whether or not that you want to take on that client in the first place. But I'm not telling you to never take on clients who do some of these things. That's for you to decide based on your current circumstances. I sometimes deviate from a few of these when other conditions are right. And I'm going to share those insights with you. But you just want to always be mindful of these potential red flags for bad clients so that you can avoid clients from hell. Now, the first red flag is when prospects don't want to follow your process or let you lead. So let's say you have a particular sales process where you want a prospect to provide certain information before you get on a call with them, and this is to screen them so you don't waste your time or theirs. Well, if they refuse to abide by it, that's a red flag because that's a sign of disrespect. My process in the beginning happens to be that, yes, I want prospects to answer a few questions first before we even talk. If we even talk at all, because it may not be a good fit. So they'll either fill out the questions in a form online or I'll email them the questions. And I also explain that the information they provide is going to help me prepare for the call. And most prospects appreciate this. I mean, if you can spend a few minutes up front before a call to do some research, isn't that beneficial to them too? But I've had a couple prospects, ironically one who was a warm lead through my alma mater, who not only refused to follow my process, but got snippy about it. And this particular person said he preferred talking to filling out forms and made some snide comments along with that. Well, we're not a good fit then because 1, you're not respecting my process, and 2, you're acting like a jerk. So that was the end of that because I explained that was my process and I had reasons for doing things this way. But, I was glad to have found that out then rather than in the middle of a project where I'm just like, oh God, But could you imagine talking to any other service provider like that? Like my naturopath, she requires all new potential clients to have a 15-minute call with her before she'll even let you make a regular appointment. And it's a free call. But this is because she wants to make sure that you're on the same page with her approach and how she treats patients. But the other thing is, if you talk to clients who don't respect your process, you might find that they feel the need to take over and lead the conversation. And then they usually start asking you a bunch of questions. And suddenly it feels like a job interview or an audition. And it feels really awkward, and you're not getting the respect you deserve. It also could be a sign that they will try to dictate everything in the design process, which will be a totally unpleasant experience because they'll be treating you as an order taker, not a design expert. There's a difference. Experts are in charge. They're in a proactive position. They tell the client how to solve the problem. Order takers are in a reactive position. The client tells them how to solve the problem. You can be whichever one you want, but it's important to note the difference and for you to decide that, not them, because otherwise you're just being thrust into that position unwillingly. A second potential red flag is when potential clients require an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Now, I know many graphic designers and web designers who refuse to engage with any potential client that requires them to sign an NDA to even talk to them. I mean, after all, if you're not used to reading contractual terms, you might need to hire a lawyer to review it for you. And should you be spending a couple $100s for that when you may not even get the project? So it's a risk. Last year, I had a client contact me and ask me to sign one. And I was annoyed at first because I thought, well, this is a bit of work that I have to do before even talking with them. But the client was going to be sending their files over for review, and the files were work that they had done for their client, so they weren't the end client. So in this case, I understood why they would ask me to sign one, but I wasn't about to pay a lawyer to review it. I've become pretty well versed with contracts over the years, so I just read it over myself and signed it, hoping that this wasn't going to be a red flag that I ignored and should have known better. Well, they ended up being one of my favorite clients ever, and they're super enjoyable to work with. They respect our expertise, they praise our work, they respect what I charge and the work that we do. They're responsive to get us what we need when we ask for it. And they've also given us a lot more work since that initial project. So had I not signed that NDA, I would have missed out on a really great client. Another potential red flag might be a potential client that sends you an RFP, request for proposal. Now, I've always worked with nonprofits, and they use RFPs in a lot of situations because they're required to. But let me tell you, I hate RFPs. Evelyn Powers, who spoke with me in the episode that we did on bad client stories, which I had way too many of, she even joked that RFP was the red flag process. I've done so many of these types of proposals over my career. I've wasted days preparing proposals, agonizing over them. I've wasted many half days going in person to present them. I've rarely ever gotten any work from them. So in hindsight, a complete waste of time. But you don't know that at the time, and you're hopeful you're going to get the work. The problem is that much of the time when an organization sends out an RFP, it's because they already know which designer they want to work with, but they're just obligated to get maybe 5 or whatever number of proposals. So I would always ask how many designers they sent the RFP to. And if they said maybe 5 or fewer than 5, I would usually respond with a proposal. But if they said they had posted it online or they shared it on an email list, forget about it. They have no idea how many people will respond. And you have no idea what your chances are. So it's not in your best interest to respond with a proposal. I even read an article about this on my business blog, warning organizations about the issues with their RFP process. Another red flag is potential clients who come to you focused on the tangible deliverable that they need, but they don't know what their goals are with the work. Usually clients have specific goals, like maybe they need to rebrand so that they come across more modern, or they need to appeal to a younger audience, and they might have financial goals like to increase sales by 25% or something. But if they don't know what they're trying to accomplish or where they want to be, how will they know when they get there? And how will either of you know if the work was successful or not? Can you help them design a new logo or brochure? Of course. But without knowing what they're trying to achieve, that could affect your design. The other part of that is that then there's no objective basis for the design. No way for you to justify your design decisions. So your design could get nitpicked by the client. And when they say they want to use red because they like it, what will you have to come back with to say why that's not a good idea? But another aspect of this is how you position your pricing. So if they're trying to get maybe 1,000 new leads from their website in whatever time period, shouldn't it be a no-brainer for them to spend more than $500 on their website? Knowing what they're looking to achieve makes it easier for you to be more confident by pricing according to those goals. And then that way they see it as an investment. Now, this next one isn't necessarily a deal breaker for not working with someone. It's just that a client who's never worked with a designer before, sometimes that can mean that working with them will be difficult, or that you have to do a lot more hand-holding than usual, more education in the process. And you may or may not be willing to do that or have time to do that. And if you do decide to work with them, you might just account for that in your pricing. Number 6 is a huge waving red flag, and that is when a prospect contacts you and asks you to work for free for shares or for exposure. And by this free, I don't mean like an animal rescue asking you for volunteer work, but someone who just doesn't want to pay or is trying to get away with not paying because they're cheap. Okay, so get this. I once had a doctor's office contact me about a brand identity. And toward the end of the conversation, they said they would be contacting other design agencies. And I was thinking to myself, well, yeah, I figured that. But then they said that after we did all the work, they would let us know whose work they were going with. And then they would pay that person. And I was like, what? I didn't think they were serious, but when I restated what I thought they were really saying, they confirmed that. So I said, no, this is not a contest. And I explained why that's a problem and how things actually work in the real world. And then I asked him, how would he feel if he did work at his job and then wasn't paid because his boss didn't like it? Or how about the doctor didn't get paid because the patient didn't like the diagnosis? I mean, that was the end of that conversation and good riddance. But I mean, if someone is that ignorant, I don't want anything to do with them. I don't want to work with them. Plus, any price you give them will be too high. Now, another time, a woman called and carried on and on about her career and herself and the awards she'd received. And then she finally got to the point about what she was looking for, which was book layout. And she wasn't happy with the previous two designers that she worked with on this book. So after her sob story and her self-pity, I said that I require 50% up front and a signed contract to start work. And she screamed at me for wasting her time. And then she said that after all that she had been through with these other two designers that were so incompetent, I should have known that she was looking for free work. Not a chance. And acting like a prick doesn't get you my sympathy either. A potential client might try to offer you shares of their company instead of payment. And you see this a lot with startups. They usually have no money. But other types of businesses might promise you exposure, but you can't control if they're going to do that or not, or when they do it, or how often they do it, and if you'll even get clients out of it. I mean, their audience can be completely off target from the clients that you normally serve, and that just makes the chance of getting work slim to none. Some potential clients might promise future work. Well, let's think about this. Why would you do free work now and risk getting nothing in the future when you could get paid for that work now and are more likely to get future work simply because they're happy with your work? Doesn't make sense to me. Something else that's potentially a red flag is clients who come to you who need just fill in the blank. Listen, just is a 4-letter word in the design industry. When clients use that word, it's like a knife in the gut, right? They've already diminished the perceived value of whatever it is they're asking for. And that means they're unlikely to want to pay what it's worth. This goes hand in hand with, it should just take you this long. Are they using Photoshop every day? Are they laying out publications? Who are they to say how long something should take? Like, where does this even come from? Well, doctor, that MRI shouldn't take that long. I mean, really? It could be a red flag when new clients contact you to have something done immediately. It could be due to a lack of planning on their part, and that might say that they're unorganized, and that might make working with them unpleasant. You know, they might drop the ball only to expect you to rush to get it done, which can just set you up for failure. You may not do your best work, there could be a mistake, and then they get upset. You know, it's like the saying, there's never enough time to do it right the first time, but there's always enough time to redo it later. I have colleagues who refuse to take on any rush work from new clients. But I recommend that if you decide to do that, that you charge at least double, because getting it done for them increases the value of the work. Plus, it needs to hurt a little bit, because it might hurt you. You know, it's going to be like a lot of work to maybe get that done in that kind of period of time. But it also might make them rethink whether or not it's really that important to get done that quickly. Another potential red flag could be when a prospect says that they've already worked with a designer, or more, like many designers, on a project, and that it didn't work out. That screaming woman I was talking about earlier, she went through 2 designers on that project and still wasn't happy. Now, she told me she shouldn't be having to pick typefaces and point out this or that or whatever, and she felt like she was doing the designer's job. Now, it could be the case that the work they did wasn't up to par. On the other hand, since she presented herself like a complete jerk, and that's a really nice way of putting it, it's more likely that she was a control freak, a micromanager, and would never be satisfied with anything. Me? I'd rather put my hand on a hot stove. Sometimes when the client refuses to give you a budget, that can be a red flag. And this can be for a few reasons. And one is that a lot of times they fear that the amount that they will state is going to be higher than what you would charge. So if they tell you that number, you might inflate what you were going to charge. But the second thing is they might not know what the work should cost. And so they might just be trying to understand that. They might not yet be at that ready to buy stage. So just be aware of those things. Clients who try to negotiate can be a red flag. Like if they're trying to talk you down in price without making other concessions. I mean, this isn't a used car lot, people, you know. asking what you could do to lower the price, there might actually be some legit options, like removing something from the scope of work, doing the work in phases instead, or extending the time frame for the work to be done in. But a client who is simply looking to bargain your rates with you is showing you disrespect. And they might be a bully client. I had a bully client who would sometimes try to negotiate. Will it really take you that long? How about I pay you this instead? He also tried to negotiate his way out of paying a few bucks in late fees by saying that he would take his work elsewhere. Well, I told him to go right ahead, and he did. I had had enough of him and his attitude, and that was the end of that relationship, thank goodness. Another red flag can be clients who insist on an hourly rate. I tell them I don't have one. Most of the time, clients who focus on the hourly rate are trying to compare rates between various freelancers, but they usually don't ask the designer that they're getting the price from how long they think the work will take them in terms of the number of hours. So what I see happen all the time is these clients go with someone with the lowest rate, but they might end up paying more because it took that designer longer to do the work than it did a designer with a higher hourly rate. So it doesn't make sense for them to ask for hourly rates without knowing the number of hours. But still, these kinds of clients are looking to pay you for your time, not your expertise, and not the value of the work. They're usually looking for the best rate they can get, which many times proves to be penny wise and pound foolish. Now, having said that, once or twice I ran into a situation where an organization required that information for a form they had to fill out for a government grant or something like that. So I told them that while I have no hourly rate, I would make up something in this case that was based on what I would charge in total and then just divide it by a certain number of days. And I think they were also trying to understand a day rate too or something. So that's an option. The next red flag is a client who won't pay up front. Now, this is not necessarily a red flag. A lot of governmental organizations, for example, only pay after getting deliverables, and then they might also take 30 days. So you have to weigh whether or not that's a deal breaker for you. I did work for a non-governmental organization once that wouldn't pay until they got final deliverables. And I inquired more about their policy, and they said they needed to see proof of work before paying. So then I negotiated with them to get 50% payment once I sent the first proof, because that was proof of work. So they actually amended their contract to say that as well. Okay, number 14 is they want to use their contract. Now, again, this is not necessarily a red flag. A lot of governmental organizations are going to require you to do this. So again, you either have to comply or not get the work. I've had a few situations where a client asked me to sign their contract. Once, they signed mine and I also signed theirs. And I had to ask them for some modifications. But here's why this can be a red flag. In this particular case, the back and forth that I had to do for that was a huge pain in the rear. And I was dealing with two people. After I sent them the contract, they asked me to forward it to someone else to sign. And I felt like I was spending more time on that than the work would take. I mean, not really, but you know what I mean. But working with them was a mess, like I was expecting. I asked for a single contact because I had two people asking me the same questions separately. It was ridiculous. I mean, there was so much hand-holding. I would tell them what I needed and ask them specific questions. I would get no reply. I would bug them again because I told them we'd get this done by a certain date. And when I finally did get a reply, they ignored my questions. So I would have to ask all over again. It was a huge pain. And I hate babysitting. Then they were on vacation unbeknownst to me until I emailed some questions and I didn't get a reply back for a week. And then suddenly they reply and say that they sent the proof to their client who was complaining about missing information. Yeah, the things that I had asked them to provide. So they ignored that I said I still needed answers to certain things. They sent the file to their client. Their client was upset, all because they couldn't read and follow my instructions in the first place. Then a little while later, they email asking me for the deliverables. And I told them that per our contract, they weren't getting any final files until I got a payment. And this was one of the terms that I had them change to suit my policy, which I guess they forgot about or chose to ignore. Well, they weren't happy about that, but that's not my problem. They said I had their word that I'd be paid. Anyway, my point is that if a client is requiring you to jump through a bunch of hoops up front, they will probably be a pain to work with. This next one is a bit nutty, but it happened. And I have proof of that. And that is that the prospect has to consult with their mother, their nephew, or whoever. Now, if that individual is qualified to make business decisions with them, or they're in business with them, that's fine. But the red flag gets waved when they're just doing it for no good reason, like they don't trust their own judgment. The other problem is that anyone that's involved in a decision-making process should be involved from the beginning. It's not the same for that person to hear secondhand information from the person that you spoke with, or to see a design proof without knowing what's been discussed and agreed to all along. It's always better for you to deal with the decision makers directly. In my early freelancing days, I once talked with a prospect and then met him for a business lunch. And I honestly can't believe I even did that now that I think about it. Anyway, he said I had to impress his mother. Like, this isn't dating. So she was there too at the lunch. And she wasn't even a part of his business, but he sought her approval for everything. And you know what they say about people and opinions? Everyone has one. Getting business advice from unqualified people is a red flag. Okay, this next one is that if the work is something that you're morally opposed to, that's a red flag. It could be something related to your faith. It could be something related to your code of ethics. Maybe you're a vegan and a meat company contacts you for a product design. I've actually declined work from small and some globally known organizations because of my beliefs. And another time I had a request to design a new magazine that would be similar to Maxim. Sorry, not interested. Now, the last red flag is clients who expect you to be available all the time, especially if they don't expect to pay more for that. They don't respect your boundaries. Now, they might ask you this up front to be more available or available like on weekends and evenings, but you may not find this out until you start working together. In my early days, I put up with a no boundaries, mentally abusive freelance client for years because it was a huge client in terms of money. I had a full-time job too, and this client had worked there at some point. But she would call me at work to harass me and ask me about this or that and put more pressure on me, even though there was a set monthly publication schedule and I had never missed a deadline. And she would also call me on weekends. Now, part of that was, me not setting boundaries, but part of that was someone who felt entitled to treat me this way because she knew it was a large monthly project for me. Okay, so now you have a lot of things to keep in mind before taking on new clients so that you take on clients who respect you and are a better fit for you. And if you want to find out more about screening clients, check out episode 46 on why designers should screen potential clients. And if you've already got a problem client on your hands and you want to learn more about how to deal with them, including how to fire them, check out episode 32. If this episode was helpful to you, please consider supporting the podcast by buying me a coffee. It might actually end up being a tea or a wine. But seriously, the proceeds will go towards the podcast efforts and expenses for the podcast, so we can continue putting out quality content for you. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/creativeboost or click on the link in the footer of the website at creative-boost.com.